live? Yes. Hello and welcome to the Tolkien Society monthly meeting and broadcast. Excuse me. It is December 15th, 2018, and we get together on the third Saturday of each month from 1 to 3 p.m. and discuss all things Tolkien and Tolkien related. I am the founder of the Tolkien Society, an official smile of the UK Tolkien Society. We've been running for years and years and years, more than a decade. And so we're glad if you can join us here. We are streaming on RPG Research's Twitch stream at twitch.tv/RPG Research. Our website is tolkienscholars.org. You can check out our previous meeting notes and reminders for meetings, etc. We do have a channel on Discord if you want to chat with us there. We do have an IRC channel at irc.merc.com, and then pound Tolkien if you want to join the chat room there, or Merc Chat. And if you want to join us remotely to participate in the conversation publicly, you can join us on Jitsi at C4, so it's the letter C, the number 4, .rpgresearch.com/TolkienMoot, M-O-O-T. All that info is on our TolkienScholars.org website, and we hope you will join us in the conversation. We seem to be a little light in participation today because of the holidays and the weather and all that. But let's go ahead and go around quickly and introduce yourselves. So I'm Hawk.
I'm Brian Huseland.
I'm Richard Baldwin.
So, and Brian, if you want to go ahead and start with last month's notes, please.
Be glad to. Thanks.
Brian's our secretary.
Thanks, Hawk. So our notes for November 17, when we last met, the Tolkien Society. Hawk, Chris, Richard, Corey, and Brian attended. We had a ranging discussion at the beginning, a little bit about the recent passing of Stan Lee, of Marvel Comics fame, and talking about superheroes and kind of the connection between superheroes with Marvel and the connection with myth, and then from there to Tolkien. And so then we segued to talking about the longing for something greater than ourselves, which superheroes kind of typify perhaps, and as well as mythology in general. And that we find that in Tolkien. And then I read the notes from October, and we had a far-reaching discussion of the October notes. Hawk brought up the fact that RPG Research did a presentation at Eagle Peak Alternative School. Just for those of you who haven't tuned in before or aren't aware, Hawk's, I don't know if you just wanted to give a real brief version. I don't know if I'm correct in this, but basically it's RPG Research is a...
Yeah, RPG Research is a nonprofit 501c3 human services and research organization studying the effects of all role-playing game formats and their potential to help improve lives.
Exactly. So Hawk's been, the build up to this has been decades, but really this is, particularly the last 3 years, 4 years is when it's been kind of more public.
It's been booming, yeah. In 2015, I had way more work than I could handle under the LLC, under RPG Therapeutics LLC, which is a for-profit recreation music therapy, role-playing game therapy services, and professional consulting services. And in 2015, I had way more work than I could handle, and I couldn't hire anybody. So I kind of backpedaled from that and have been training people through RPG Research. And as of this week, employee number 1 for RPG Therapeutics LLC is John Welker. So he's the VP at RPG Research. He's now employee number 1 at RPG Therapeutics. And part of that is because he's now ready, and a couple others are now ready to start being billable professional game masters. And part of that is because Eagle Peak, so it's part of Spokane Public School District. Eagle Peak Public School is an alternative school for 4th through 12th grade students. They have about 100 students, it varies from year to year. And they tried to implement a role-playing game group there, and after a few sessions it went horribly wrong. And so they've asked us to come in and try to do it because we have the experience of working with at-risk populations and implementing games. And I need game masters to do this. I can only run one table myself, and we want to be able to run multiple. And so we're looking at hiring at least 3 game masters over there. That should start in January, February. Beginning pay is $20 an hour, and we hope to get people with certifications doing up to 40 to 60 an hour eventually over time. So people are applying, and I've been going through the interview process. So that's coming along. But the neat thing is that we're helping people. So RPG Research, we do volunteers, and so schedules are flaky, and I told him, we could do something once a month for a couple of months to help you, But if you want something regularly, that's going to be the LLC, because the only way I can count on people being there is if they're being paid.
Right.
And so they opted to go with the LLC. Businesses are donating to help cover the costs, and we're still in contract negotiations to finalize that, but that's very exciting.
That's very exciting. That's great.
And then there's a documentary about us, about role-playing games in prisons that is underway as well, that will be part of coming up in 2019.
Okay, so that's coming. It's down the road.
In 2019, yeah. It's already starting now, but
Okay.
2019 is when it's really going to ramp up.
Great.
Those are two really big things, yeah.
Okay, so that's a documentary, and is that through?
That's a professional documentary company on role-playing games in prisons.
Okay, so just basically a documentary is in the works
Yeah.
for role playing and in prisons, and
Yeah.
you will.
I'm under NDA about the rest of the details, but
Right.
we can just let you know.
Right,
that.
but you'll be involved somehow.
Yes. And then I'm back from PAX Unplugged, so speaking in Philadelphia on therapeutic gaming, and then on Friday with a panel.
Yeah, how'd that go?
Very well. And then Saturday on inclusiveness and accessibility in gaming, and that went well as well. The whole event went very well, but I was already sick when I went, and it aggravated my illness, and I'm still recovering in my lungs and such. So.
And that's called PAX East?
PAX Unplugged. PAX East is all video game electronic stuff. Unplugged is analog.
Gotcha.
So it's only second year they've done analog, but it was thousands of people.
There's an interest. I mean,
Oh
I
yeah,
think
it
it's
was
booming.
big. It was packed.
Yeah.
So that went very well. The videos and audio will be available soon.
Yeah, that'd be great if we could get some links.
That'll all be on RPG Research.
Is that trademarked soon? Or
What's that?
is that trademarked soon?
What? Is what trade?
Gaming joke.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sorry.
So, thanks for that update, Hawk, on RPG Research.
Yep.
Also, last time we talked, you mentioned your chapter for a book on therapeutic recreation, RPG therapy, and that's
Yes.
just a continuing thing you're
Yeah, I'm working on, and I'm
Working on.
frantically trying to get done, but being
Yep.
sick and medicated has slowed down. so it's still
understood.
in the
So we look
process.
forward to that someday.
Yep.
PAX Unplugged, you already referred
Yep.
to. You mentioned that Google search engine suppressed Tolkien site
Yes.
for a few weeks.
It wasn't just Tolkien sites, it was all of my sites.
All of your
I have
sites.
over 200 and something domains,
Mhm.
about 40 different communities, 30, 40 different communities.
So you're blacklisted almost.
I was blacklisted. It's the search results were suppressed, which is not the same as a blacklist,
Okay.
but it is effectively blacklisted. That lasted a little over a month.
Right.
It's gone away. It looks like it was because I had Google business listings at the same address for 4 different businesses, because I have 5 different businesses. And I had 4 of them at my office, which is a legitimate company office that people can access and meet clients at, etc. But Google's policy, their system doesn't like if you have multiple businesses at the same address. And so they penalized me for it. So I've been deleting
They assumed it was a
my
scam.
businesses from Google Business, because that hasn't ever really gotten me any business anyway.
Right.
I have to delete from Google Maps, Google Business. I'm not deleting from the search results, but by getting rid of that conflict, everything's been coming back. And I'm just deleting it, because Google Business has never helped me with my business.
And
Google search results are
Right.
critical. That's 90% of my traffic.
And did Michael Martinez help you with some of this, or?
Ish, yeah.
Ish,
He
yeah.
certainly, yeah. He didn't know anything about the Google business side, but he certainly explained everything. I mean, yes, he definitely helped me in trying to understand what was going on.
Right. It's so complex, and he's kind of an expert.
He's
in
an
it.
SEO, yeah, search engine optimization theorist and specialist.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that
But
there's
we've recovered.
no apparent residual effects from it, but hopefully
Yeah,
that
for the
won't happen
moment.
again. And then you shared also last month, Hawk, that through Google Plus, which is again going away soon.
Yes.
But a person in Egypt shared a video showing English and Arabic translations of Tolkien. I don't think I got the link for that, so if you want to send that to me, maybe we can put that into the notes. Or
The person in Egypt,
yeah, I don't know if you were thinking that we would want to put that on.
I haven't seen much follow-up on it, so.
Okay.
A lot of times these things, people come in with intentions and they never follow through,
Oh,
so I
okay.
haven't seen much of that.
Okay, so he.
So
there's
who
nothing,
knows?
there's
Well,
nothing more on that.
Well, it was shortly after that the Google announcement happened.
Oh,
so
right.
He's
Okay.
probably changing platforms. And a lot of people are like, so there's the Google Plus vacancy, and a lot of people are leaving Facebook because of all of Facebook's violations. Millions. So there's a surge now of brand new social networks all over, MeWe and one something or other, and a whole bunch of different ones. And So it's kind of a revival of new social network. Remember, for a long time there, it wasn't Facebook that was dominant as a social network. It was
Well, it would have been MySpace
MySpace. Yeah,
originally.
yeah. And MySpace was the dominant social network. And
Mhm.
now MySpace is totally passé.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
mostly just music and it's old people and it's dead.
Well, I've been told
It's
by my
effective.
kids, we don't use Facebook much anymore. And that was
Yeah.
even 2 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
It was like
passé.
Yeah, because
Trends.
it's right Instagram or
Trendy.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's changing again, right? This is a shakeup. The good thing is there's now open source social networks that you can set up on your own servers, and I'm looking at different ones. Now the problem is most of them are PHP based, which is really insecure and eats you alive in the maintenance.
Mhm.
So I've been looking at others than Python, Ruby, and Java. It's hopefully better alternatives. But I am planning to set up my own social network, at least for the gaming side. So I grabbed the domain GameKith, as in kith and kin,
Yes.
because kith means friends,
Friends.
neighbors, and family.
Absolutely.
It covers, kith and kin's redundant. You're not supposed to say both. That's considered an English faux pas.
But it's not.
People do it all the time. It definitionally is. You're saying the same thing.
Like Panzer
Kith
Tank.
covers friends, family, and neighbors, and kin covers
I
family
thought
and neighbors.
I thought Kith was
Yeah, this-
non-family.
I was just reading all about the
Oh,
etymology,
really?
and it's considered an English faux pas.
Interesting.
People do it. It's a phrase. People
So
use
Kith is
kin.
more expansive.
Yes.
Kin is more restricted.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's redundant to use both.
Panzer Tank is
Yeah.
kind of in the same category.
What's that?
Panzer Tank, you're saying tank.
Right.
Right.
Well, but then you're getting into products and stuff too. So.
Yes. Yes. So
Uh,
can I?
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Anyway, so I'm planning to set up a social network at GameKith.com. I'm just looking at different options, and that it'll be comparable in features to like a Facebook or Google Plus, whatever, Twitter, etc. But none of the privacy violations. It's not going to have ads. It's not there to harvest your data. Your data is your own data. I don't care. I don't want to know. It's there to be a social network for all the different communities. At least the gaming side, I might set up a different one for Tolkien. I don't know. I might just split it into it. But because you've heard how frustrated I am with these other social networks, and I don't even use my name. I always use fake names, assumed names, or business names, and I've always butted heads with these agencies because they want to harvest my data, and I won't let them. That won't be a problem on our own platform. Now, of course, the problem is getting
Word
critical
out.
mass. Yeah, that's the problem. It's just another website otherwise. So we'll see what happens. I don't expect it to be big in any way,
Yeah.
but if we can at least get our community engaged through it, like the people who do want to be in touch with each other through all those features, I'm going to give it a shot. So that'll be at gamekith.com, K-I-T-H. I found a nice, short, catchy, distinctive domain that I thought would work. So we'll see how that unfolds. And I will probably just blend Tolkien Society and Other Minds magazine, all that into that social network because they're all overlapping between Tolkien and gaming and all of that. So
On a related topic,
Yes.
So you may remember that last year, the One Ring, Cubicle 7 rather, their forum for the One Ring for role playing, which is of course it's based on Tolkien and Middle Earth and all that. But those tour forums were hugely helpful for game masters, and just sharing ideas, sharing different, asking questions, and because of the new laws in Europe, Cubicle 7 just shut down the whole forum, and
Right.
they gave just very
Yeah.
brief notice.
yeah.
So
They
now
have
where
to,
that
it's 'cause
is,
of laws.
yep.
And now with the new one that they're trying to shove through on the copyright stuff, it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah. So the alternative, just for those who may be following more the role playing side of Tolkien here, is that that is actually on RPG Geek is where most people have landed,
Okay.
who were on the former Tor forums,
Okay.
and one of the things that was a real huge concern was that a lot of this material that was original content was lost, but apparently some of it has been able to be reconstituted through somebody who did manage to archive some of it quickly.
Okay.
But there was a lot of material there to do so. But
Yeah.
anyway, so they've got a number of threads, and it's been hard for
The
them.
EU is wreaking havoc with the internet. They are trying to destroy it. because it's a threat to highly dictatorial powers that be.
Well,
So in a lot of countries in Europe, a lot of countries in Europe, you're not allowed to say anything negative about their politicians. You can go to prison for saying anything negative. Doesn't have to be proven slander. Just saying bad things about their politicians, you can go to prison in quite a few of the EU member countries. And they don't have, a lot of people here in the U.S. and stuff, we have a lot more freedom of speech that doesn't exist in the EU, or it's, and it's from country to country. It's very different. And so a lot of the powers that be over there hate how free the internet has been. And these laws are, they do it under the disguise of trying to help people, but it's really just a way to lock things down even more. It is heading in the direction
So you
of
think it's
China.
more control rather than consumer protection?
It is totally. It is under the guise of consumer protection, but its true purpose is control and restriction in the direction of China.
I thought part of it might be also a monetary gain, just because like with
It also kills off all the small competition because only large companies can afford the lawyers
right,
to set all this stuff up.
yeah, and then the huge
Yeah,
payments.
it's killing off all the small mom and pop shops.
Yeah,
All those forums and everything were small mom and pop
which
shops.
is kind of
that were
ironic
smart.
because the internet really began, didn't it?
It was a military. It was
Switzerland,
DARPANET and ARPANET. So Defense Agency Research Projects. Agency.
Well, Al Gore invented the internet.
No! Stop that.
That's an inconvenient falsehood.
So it was DARPANET. The goal was to create a redundant communication system that could survive a nuclear holocaust. So the first inner DARPANET was some four nodes set up between California and Utah. So University of Utah, and then 3 different nodes in between Northern and Southern California. Think of a big triangle with a little kink to it, but just kind of an oddly shaped triangle. And the goal was, if you took one node out, let's say Southern California, traffic would reroute through the north and over that way, so that it can get around whichever way. Take out a different node, it'll reroute. And so that was the initial one they set up. And the first message they sent crashed all the servers, like the very first message, because they were trying to figure out packet protocols and all this for networking. But eventually they got it working and were able to send text messages to the computers, and then it grew from there. DARPANET, then ARPANET, and then eventually. What's that?
Are we there yet?
No. I was referring to Alexander Graham Bell.
Oh.
Right, yes.
Are you there?
Yes.
Was it Watson, I think?
Yes. And,
Have you seen the Geico ad with that?
So anyway, the internet started in the U.S. as a military project. But the universities were heavily involved with it, and then it grew to become a civilian thing. I was on the internet as early as the late '70s, thanks to some friends at the University of Utah. I was only a kid, but I got access. And bulletin boards were a big growing thing too, and the internet made those internationally accessible.
Kind of
so
serverless,
dial-up.
sort of?
They were bulletin boards, and they had chat rooms and everything else. So anyway, and then in '82, the domain system was implemented. So before you had to download a list of all the servers and their IP addresses, 1982 they did a domain name server system. So now you could type in a name like TolkienScholars.org, and it would do the translation for you. And then that made it a lot more accessible for a lot of people. And then the big one that did it was the web. In 1994, NCSA Mosaic was made. They made a web browser. They used HTML technology concepts from earlier years, put them into the W3C protocols, the web, and it's the web that made the internet accessible to the vast majority of people. That web interface, which is a layer on top of the internet. And it has been an incredible boon to openness of communication, speed of development. It has changed the world.
Research.
And so, research, communities, finding like-minded people scattered around like we do. And that is always a threat to power. Communication, the speed of sharing of information is always a threat to power. And the EU is crunching down on that hard, unfortunately.
I've only
It's
heard of
really
that in the
damaging.
context of China. I haven't heard that EU.
Yeah, well, they're not putting up
China
firewalls.
censors more, whereas
China has a firewalls that control all traffic.
right, they're more interested in keeping certain things out.
Well,
and certain
that's
things
what the
in.
EU is doing.
But
now.
whereas the EU, I think, is just it's more even at the more
Their control,
basic level.
well, of speech.
Yeah.
But China does that too.
Yeah.
China totally does that. You say
Yeah.
the wrong thing, you're going to a gulag.
Right. Yeah.
You're disappearing. And they have automated bots that go through and find. They've been doing that forever. China's always had that lockdown.
Well, that's the interesting thing
But this
about...
is bad that the EU's doing it.
Sure.
It's really bad.
Well, and that's part of the reason why, and I don't want to go too far off the topic here, but I think that if Tolkien were alive today, maybe he would think the same thing. I don't know. But I think that Brexit is actually, in some ways, good for Britain, in that I think it's better for Britain to be out of the EU because of the fact that you have more say.
Except that this law goes after people outside of the EU.
Right.
So if they have a citizen or a business or whatever that's in the EU and you somehow serve them from your server here in the US, they will still go after and sue you through global courts.
Mm-hmm.
They will have ICANN, the other shut down your website for non-compliance, etc. This is a horrible grab for power and overreach, and it's really bad. And for organizations like us, which are all about freedom of speech, so for example, we do readings. Now in the US, fair use says we can do these as long as we interject with commentary and stuff like that. It's okay for us to read from these books. That's fair use under a copyright law in the US. That is not necessarily the same in other countries. Mm-hmm. And until this EU thing trying to shove through, they didn't really have international backing, and you didn't have to worry about it. The most they could do is ban you in that country. They couldn't come after you.
Right.
This potentially changes. If this law passes, and I haven't heard yet if it did or not. It was like last week. It was a week away, so I didn't have a minute. This is catastrophic. And yeah, it really hurts the internet horribly, and it really compartmentalizes it and makes people want to break back into being more segregationist and such. This is bad. And it affects groups like us because we're an international group of people, who join us and we have these discussions from around the world. That could be a problem because just for our readings alone, for example, that's why this is applicable. Mm-hmm. Anything we show on screen, if it has artwork, that might be considered a violation because we're showing somebody's artwork without getting explicit written permission.
Like that thing we just pulled up before this started.
I mean, we're going to do it anyway, but I'm just saying these are the considerations. These are the consequences of these laws that people don't take into account. They do it under the auspices of claiming it's helping protect artists and others who are being ripped off, etc. But in reality, it's a power grab.
It's used to rip off the artists and authors.
It rips off everybody, and it utterly is so bad for the internet. So bad. And it makes me very sad. Because there's been a wonderful reign of freedom and interaction and community and speech. It's just been incredible. But powers that be hate that. So anyway.
Well, we'll see about linking something up there for later. Okay, let's continue on. I just have a few last things to share on the notes. Oh yes, so I shared about Tolkien Society posting a BBC Radio 3 episode on Mirkwood, which I was going to put the link in, and I'm so sorry I did not. So we'll have to backfill that.
Bummer.
But it's a great radio piece that you can listen to. It's 15 minutes long, and it's about Mirkwood. It's where did he find this Mirkwoodu reference, and
we talked about it.
Yeah. So Tolkien used that name, and again, it's the context of Tolkien's writings. But it's lovely. It's a lot about the woods, and the idea of wilderness, and how that was a much stronger motif. And I think actually in the Fall of Arthur, there's a reference to this as well. You may have that in there. And then we start taking turns reading Tolkien's Letter 153. We got partway through it, and we discussed things such as the relationship between a creator and human beings as sub-creators, and then also about creation and sub-creation, and the difference between that. Trolls versus ants, talking about some of the distinctions. And then Tom Bombadil, we got off. Of course, he always finds his way into discussions. We paused at the beginning of the paragraph. I have already dealt with the problem of elf-human marriage. Okay. So that's where we're going to pick it up from.
Okay.
And next time, our plan was that we will finish letter 153 and hopefully discuss the fall of Gondolin.
Yes.
Christopher Tolkien's
which is our theme for Tolkien Moot.
Yep.
2019.
Yes, it will be. It'll be number 15.
Yeah, in July. Which I gotta make sure I get the timing right because Katie and I are getting married 4th of July. We got the honeymoon and everything.
Yeah, you need to have a little bit of space
so
there.
So we might have to push that
I
off
think
or
that's
something
completely,
to August or something.
completely
We're gonna-
understood. Yes.
Depends on what ends up happening with their honeymoon. So as far as we still haven't figured out what we're
Plans
doing.
and such. Yeah.
So,
Well,
like,
I think
passport
that
fixed.
gives you more of a cushion
Yeah.
to look for August.
Yeah.
And I'm not going on any road trips, so
Okay.
You're not.
August sounds good to me.
All right.
I thought you had one scheduled to avoid any contact with me.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else in the notes there?
No, that's all. That's all it is.
Okay, Richard, you wanted to talk about your piece.
Share what you have, Richard.
So
I've got a. I submitted a short story for my writers group. Has been putting out. Last year they put out a anthology, written by authors that went to the group,
Right.
and I held back on that and didn't decide to submit anything because I was having issues with writer's block and things. And then this second year, I submitted something. They were initially going to try and do it right afterwards, and then decided that was too much work. So they said, "Why don't we just do it once a year?" So,
Right.
so they delayed it. So the original story that I submitted, I pulled out and published independently, and then wrote a replacement story. And now it's gone full circle, and the second anthology is out with the replacement story in it that I did for it. The title of the story in the anthology is Inheritors of the Broken Compact. It's a little bit long, but it kind of fits. You can't it fits from if I manage to do a sequel. In the first one, it's really because I'm busy trying to introduce the world and set up the conflict and introduce characters. I don't have time to delve into why that title is appropriate.
Okay.
So.
Well, cool. And so everybody can find this on Amazon. Do you have a website or anything that people can link to?
No,
Okay. So to find it,
yeah.
we had to type in because it got kind of buried, as you pointed out.
Yeah, they poorly chose a title.
So it would be "Are We There Yet?" Book Baldwin, Baldwin will show the book.
Well,
And if you go to Amazon and type that in the search box, "Are We There Yet?" Book Baldwin, and you will find the result.
And that's an anthology of short stories by,
And yours is one story
by-
in there.
but with writers group.
Right.
The Spokane
It's,
Fiction Writers Group.
Spokane Fiction Writers Group.
Okay.
And
In all total, it's
We'll get the
the
link
same
on
size
it,
as
too.
a full-size novel.
Okay.
we'll
Cool.
put the link in the notes as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thanks,
On
Richard.
TolkienScholars.org.
So
Christopher Kuberstein finally logged in and watching. Okay. And
Cool.
Chris, if you want to join the chat, if you have the ability through Jitsi, you can go to c4.rpgresearch.com. So the letter C, the number 4, .rpgresearch.com/TolkienMoot. And we've got Jitsi up and running there if you're interested in audio and video. Otherwise, you can just post there in the Twitch channel and I'll read your comments as you wish.
Can you relay stuff to the second monitor? I only see stuff when you're tabbing, alt tabbing.
What do you want to see?
Oh,
Okay,
myself,
I got-
I like to see myself.
and me.
Yeah, me.
There you go.
Thank you.
um,
Makes me
Well,
feel
not
like,
to fiddle
I'm
with too
actually
much.
doing something instead of looking at a blank
yeah,
screen.
if somebody joins us in the chat room, then that's what I usually put up there in the Twitch, or excuse me, the Jitsi room. So c4.rpgresearch.com/Tolkien. Oops, that's needs to be Tolkien Moot. Oops.
Screen's kind of breaking your arm there. It's kind of funny. Sorry.
Yeah, so Corey makes his apologies that he wishes he could be here, but he got his Saturdays mixed up, so
Okay.
no problem.
C'est la vie. Say it. Say it. La vie, la vie. All right.
Say la vie.
And we're also in Discord as well under the Tolkien Moot, channel.
Okay.
Tolkien Scholars channel, what have you. All right. So we got that covered with Richard. We've read through all the notes.
We have.
All right. Then I guess we'll continue the letters reading. Unless, Chris, you have anything you want to discuss before we get into reading letters. Where did we leave off on 153?
Yeah.
Remember?
Yep, I have it. So that was in the notes. It's at the top of the paragraph. I have already dealt with the problem of elf-human marriage.
Okay, if you want to start from there.
Sure.
There it is.
Pulling up here.
Okay, I've got it. Or if you want, I can start.
Sure.
I have already dealt with the biological difficulty of elf-human marriage. It occurs, of course, in fairy story and folklore, though not all cases have the same notions behind them. But I have made it far more exceptional. I do not see that reincarnation affects the resulting problems at all. But immortality, in my world only within the limited longevity of the earth, does, of course, as many fairy stories perceive. In the primary story of Luthien and Beren, Luthien is allowed as an absolute exception to divest herself of immortality and become mortal. But when Beren is slain by the wolf warden of the gates of hell, Luthien obtains a brief respite in which they both return to Middle-earth alive, though not mingling with other people, a kind of Orpheus legend in reverse, but one of pity, not of inexorability. Tuor weds Idril, the daughter of Turgon, king of Gondolin, and it is supposed, not stated, that he, as an unique exception, receives the elvish limited immortality, an exception either way. Eärendil is Tuor's son and father of Elros, first king of Númenor, and Elrond, their mother being Elwing, daughter of Dior, son of Beren and Luthien. So the problem of the half-elven becomes united in one line. The view is that the half-elven have a power of irrevocable choice, which may be delayed, but not permanently, which kin's fate they will share. Elros chose to be a king, and Longaevos but mortal. So all his descendants are mortal, and of a specially noble race, but with dwindling longevity. So Aragorn, who, however, has a greater lifespan than his contemporaries, double, though not the original Númenorian treble, that of men. Elrond chose to be among the elves. His children, with a renewed elvish strain, since their mother was
Celebrian.
Celebrian,
Celebrian.
daughter of Galadriel,
Oh yeah, that's right. It's always a hard.
have to make their choices.
That's
Arwen is not a reincarnation of Luthien. That, in the view of this mythical history, would be impossible, since Luthien has died like a mortal and left the world of time, but a descendant very like her in looks, character, and fate. When she weds Aragorn, whose love story elsewhere recounted is not here central and only occasionally referred to, she makes the choice of Luthien. So the grief at her parting from Elrond is specially poignant. Elrond passes over the sea. The end of his sons, Eladon and Elrohir, is not told. They delay their choice and remain for a while. I want to continue. Let's see, there's a footnote.
Indeed.
There are no templates or churches or fanes in this world among good peoples. They had little or no religion in the sense of worship. For help they may call on a Vala, as Elbereth, as a Catholic might on a saint, though no doubt knowing in theory as well as he that the power of the Vala was limited and derivative. But this is a primitive age, and those folk may be said to view the Vala as children view their parents or immediate adult superiors. And though they know they are subjects of the king, he does not live in their country nor have there any dwelling. I do not think hobbits practice.
No.
Hobbits.
I do not think they
I
know
do
they
not
are
think
subjects.
hobbits practice what?
I think you skipped a line. I do not think they know they are subjects to the king. Oh no, you're right. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah. I do not think hobbits practice any form of worship or prayer unless through exceptional contact with elves. The Númenóreans and others of that branch of humanity that fought against Morgoth, even if they elected to remain in Middle-earth and did not go to Númenor, such as Rohirrim, were pure monotheists. But there was no temple in Númenor until Sauron introduced the cult of Morgoth. The top of the mountain, the Meneltarma, or Pillar of Heaven, was dedicated to Eru, the One, and there at any time privately and at certain times publicly, God was invoked, praised, and adored, an invitation of the Valar and the mountain of Aman. But Númenor fell and was destroyed, and the mountain engulfed, and there was no substitute. Among the exiles, remnants of the faithful who had not adopted the false religion or taken part in rebellion, religion as divine worship, though perhaps not as philosophy and metaphysics, seems to have played a small part. though a glimpse of it is caught in Faramir's remark on Grace at Meat, Volume 2, page 285.
And of course, one of the first... Oh, go ahead.
I have a rabbit trail kind of thing that hooks into Numenor.
Okay.
There's this object in the middle of the Sahara Desert called the Eye of Sahara. And when people have measured it, it fits the description of Atlantis.
You mean in terms of the rings,
Yeah,
the concentric system?
yeah. It fits that description of the system of the canals and the islands.
Okay.
And a guy's been on YouTube. Has been doing a couple videos on it.
Cool. All right.
That also made me think of Tolkien Moot 1, or
Escape
Mercon.
from Numenor.
Yes.
Yes.
Still want you to run that again.
Okay.
But I wasn't there, that's why I'm so interested.
The other question that popped into my head was,
I only had snippets
wasn't-
recorded.
on Numenor, wasn't there a shrine on a mountain?
That's the Mental Tarma. It wasn't a shrine. It was just that people went to the top of the mountain in the center of the island and prayed either privately or for some rare special events. But there wasn't an actual
Right,
temple or anything.
and that seems to be a point he's making. Is
Right.
There was no temple, no shrine, no
Except for
building.
what Sauron did.
Well, right.
He made, when Sauron was captured, he slowly corrupted our Pharazôn and had him make temples to Morgoth, which then the smokes were burning all the time as they incinerated people as offerings.
Yeah.
And it's on the cover, Escape from Numenor, for the module. It's a couple different artist renderings, and one of them is Sauron on top of the temple, defying the lightning bolts that are coming from Valar's stuff. Yeah, shortly before the destruction of Numenor. So those temples existed because of Sauron. So it's interesting, as he explicitly states, there was no organized religion or churches or temples for the free peoples. He says that explicitly, because there were for the Morgothian and Sauron folk. They did have worship and priests and things like that.
Because they were all about control.
Control, yeah. Lack of free choice and all. Yeah. Which is very interesting, considering his Catholic background,
Yeah.
that he would choose
I think he's...
to only have the bad guys have that kind of
Yeah,
structured
'cause
religion.
certainly
I always
he's
thought
not
that
coming
was an
from a-
interesting irony.
It
Because he
is.
certainly doesn't hate Catholicism at all. He loves
Not
it.
at all.
It's very interesting that it
Well,
comes
the use
across
of the
that way
word
in the story.
primitive, it's like, what is he trying to
Yeah.
convey there? He's trying to, a simpler time, maybe. Some kind of...
Well, a lot of his thinking was molded by the Norse sagas that he bathed himself in
Yeah.
mentally.
We have somebody, Lex Trucks, I think he's over
Yeah.
in Europe, says, "Hey Hawk, where's all this lore coming from, Simulacrum?" So we meet every third Friday. We're a Tolkien Society. We're official Smile, the UK Tolkien Society. We run an annual Tolkien convention called Tolkien Moot, and we've had published authors speak at our moot and such. John D. Ratliff, Michael Martinez, Professor Seaman, many others have been speakers at our gatherings and events and such. And so we discuss these things at length. We're very much into Tolkien lore and knowledge and history and such. So, and most of my games since the early days, I've adapted frequently to Middle Earth.
Was he perhaps asking what your sources were?
Yeah, so we're talking about Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Silmarillion, Gondolin, the history of Middle Earth, and then we're reading from the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien. Is what we're currently reading from.
Well, there's this one too.
I remember Lex Trucks from before.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so that...
But like, is this lore coming from other artists or from Tolkien himself? Right now, we're reading the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, so this is Tolkien himself defining what is and is not, and we're discussing that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, did Chris have any comments?
No, he was just telling Lex Trucks that's from Lord of the Rings and such.
Gotcha.
But we're specifically reading from letter 153, since you must have joined us after we started saying that. Letter 153, the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, dated 1954 September. So, Brian, you want to continue from where I left off?
Yeah, sure.
As for whose authority decides these things?
Yeah. Okay. As for whose authorities decides these things, the powers...
The immediate authorities.
The immediate authorities are the Valar, powers or authorities, the gods, in quotes. But they are only created spirits, of high angelic order, we should say, with their attendant lesser angels, reverend, therefore, but not worshipful.
Then we talked about the temples.
Exactly. And though potently subcreative and resident on earth, to which they are bound by love, having assisted in its making and ordering, they cannot by their own will alter any fundamental provision. They called upon the One in the crisis of the rebellion of Numenor, when the Numenorians attempted to take the undying land by force of a great armada in their lust for corporal immortality, which necessitated a catastrophic change in the shape of earth. Immortality and mortality being the special gifts of God to the Erohini, in whose conception and creation the Valar had no part at all, it must be assumed that no alteration of their fundamental kind could be effected by the Valar, even in one case, the cases of Luthien and Tuor, and the position of their descendants was a direct act of God. The entering into men of the elven strain is indeed represented as part of a divine plan for the ennoblement of the human race, from the beginning destined to replace the elves. Are there any bounds to a writer's job, quote, except those imposed by his own finiteness? No bounds but the laws of contradiction, I should think. And of course this is going back to the first part of the letter in which he's answering the friendly but pointed criticisms of a reader of Tolkien who is also a fellow Catholic and had issues with a number of these things. So he says, no bounds but the laws of contradiction, I should think, but of course humility and an awareness of peril is required. A writer may be basically benevolent according to his lights, as I hope I am, and yet not be beneficent owing to error and stupidity. I would claim, if I did not think it presumptuous in one so ill-instructed, to have as one object the elucidation of truth, and the encouragement of good morals in this real world, by the ancient device of exemplifying them in unfamiliar embodiments, that may tend to, quote, bring them home. But of course I may be in error at some or all points. My truths may not be true, or they may be distorted, and the mirror I have made may be dim and cracked. But I should need to be fully convinced that anything I have feigned is actually harmful, per se, and not merely because misunderstood, before I should recant or rewrite anything.
Richard,
Wow.
Okay, do you want to discuss that, or?
Sorry.
You can read some
Spacing
if you want. Great harm.
Actually, can I borrow your hard copy?
Yep.
It's a little easier to read.
That one right
Yeah.
there.
My tiny little phone. Sorry.
I have a bigger phone.
I have a big
Where am I?
Great harm.
Great harm can be done, of course, by this potent mode of myth, especially willfully. The right to freedom of the sub-creator is no guarantee among fallen men that it will not be used as wickedly as is free will. I am comforted by the fact that some more pious and learned than I have found nothing harmful in this tale or its feignings as a myth. So
Freedom. He seems to be pointing out he's
Well,
got freedom.
he's talking about the contradiction between free will and fallenness, isn't he?
Well, I thought he was saying, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought he was saying that in terms of the writer potentially saying something in fantasy that could be taken wrong, and he's saying, I think that there's less danger of that. In writing, he's not concerned as much about saying things that would be considered literally true or damaging.
He's
to
just worried
somebody's
about
faith.
contradiction. Contradiction's
Yes.
the big catch.
Is it inherently consistent?
Is the inner logic working?
Yep.
That's the big pitfall to watch out for.
Right.
The rest of it doesn't matter outside of that sub-creation, its own creation. You can do whatever. The writer has the right to do whatever they want with it, and people can criticize if they want, but really it's ultimately up to the writer. As long as that writer's internal consistency works,
Right.
that's the one faux pas that he's saying is the biggest concern for a writer. Other than that, the writer has all the power and freedom to do what they want.
So in this hard copy, he starts the next paragraph with "to conclude," and it goes on for a page.
Yes. Yes, he does.
That was making
He
me
was
chuckle.
not known for his
Brevity.
pitfalls.
Short note. To conclude, having mentioned free will, I might say that in my myth I have used subcreation in a special way, not the same as subcreation of the term in criticism of art, though I tried to show allegorically how that might come to be taken up in creation in some plane of my purgatorial story, Leaf by Niggle. Interesting, because he was always...
Well, but he's talking about Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, how he detested allegory, but
Oh.
he did write short stories that were intentionally allegorical.
To make visible and physical the effects of sin or misused free will by men. Free will is derivative, and is... what's this 3 triangles mean in your hard copy?
Therefore. It means therefore.
Oh. Did he put that in the... is that just... oh well.
That's
and
all.
is therefore only operative within provided circumstances. I've never seen that before through me.
You know what? It's been a while, so I just suddenly reminded me. Yeah.
But in order that it may exist, it is necessary that the author should guarantee it, whatever betides. And then it's :SC.
Especially?
South Carolina?
No. I think it's specially.
When it is against his will, as we say, at any rate, it appears on a finite view. He does not stop or make unreal sinful acts and their consequences. So in this myth, it is framed, legitimately, whether that is a feature of the real world or not, that he gave special subcreative powers to certain of his highest created beings. That is a guarantee that when they devised and made, should be given the reality of creation.
This is really fascinating because he's saying actually he's basically
Well, that brings to mind the creation of the dwarf story.
well, right, yes, but I think he's specifically saying against the criticism. Well, look, Tolkien, you're a Christian, and don't you think that if you are writing some of these things that people are going to take the wrong views, or aren't you stretching this or that? And he's saying, well, I believe that I am a sub-creator, and by virtue of that, it's assumed that the sub-creator is not going to be making exact copies, but within that story or whatever that is made, there's going to be the likeness of the world, but not
at least a reflection.
Yeah, a reflection, but not a one-for-one correspondence.
Of course, within limits and of course subject to certain commands or prohibitions. But if they fell, as the Diabolus?
Yeah, it means devil.
I know what it means, I'm just worrying about the pronunciation.
Diabolus, I think.
Diabolus Morgoth did and started making things for himself to be their lord, there would then be, even if Morgoth broke the supreme ban against making other rational creatures like elves or men, they would at least be real physical realities in the physical world, however evil they might prove, even mocking the children of God. They would be Morgoth's greatest sins, abuses of his highest privilege, and would be creatures begotten of sin and naturally bad. I nearly wrote irredeemably bad, but that would be going too far, because by accepting or tolerating their making, necessary to their actual existence, even orcs could become part of the world, which is God's ultimately good. Which is God's and ultimately good. But
and
what
we've done in role-playing game sessions where
Yeah.
Snaga.
Buzz?
Well, just playing a conflicted orc.
Yeah.
An orc who maybe
An
wants...
orc slave.
Yes.
Who's just a slave. He's not a warrior orc. He's a
Yeah.
Snaga. He's been forced to do all these things.
And so therefore there might be some room for...
So
He's the
yeah,
guy
he
who,
can be
who
redeemed.
carries the chest of holding. But whether they could have souls or spirits seems a different question. And since in my myth at any rate I do not conceive of the making of souls or spirits, things of an equal order if not an equal power to the Valar, as a possible delegation, I have represented at least the orcs as a pre-existing real beings on whom the Dark Lord has exerted the fullness of his power in remodeling and corrupting them, not making them. That God would tolerate that seems no worse theology than the toleration of the calculated dehumanizing of men by tyrants that goes on today.
Touche.
Much like EU. There might be other makings all the same which were more like puppets filled only at a distance with their maker's mind and will, or ant-like operating under direction of a queen center. So could you, maybe is that is he maybe saying that the only thing that I can think of that would be like that is the trolls and the fact that they turn to stone when they're exposed to light.
But what he's talking about is the exerting control over. So the will of Morgoth and later the will of Sauron. When Morgoth fell and then later when Sauron fell, all the tribes and such broke up because it was their force of will that was making them work cooperatively.
The process
together.
that was going through my head was that the trolls are kind of like puppets that when they're exposed to sunlight, they go back to...
Right, it breaks the spell. It breaks the spell of their
So they're kind of like empty puppets.
They're both.
Yeah. They're not empty, though. He imbues them with a little bit of will and thought, as we see with Bill and Tom and what have you.
Maybe.
Squash him to jelly.
Nothing,
arguing over
nothing
different
but
stuff.
mutton to eat.
Later on,
But
though,
Sauron was clearly not exerting his will on them when they were behaving that way.
Yes.
They were not working cooperatively. They were reverting to their natural nature there. And then the sunlight, destroyed the spell that animated them.
I think the sunlight spell thing just reminds us that these creatures, that Morgoth could never be capable of the same
Creation
level
from
of
scratch.
sophistication and scratch. Yeah.
You can only do permutations.
And therefore, something that would be
His was a mockery of the Ents.
ultimately fallible or could just kind of fall apart in certain conditions.
Yeah.
Whereas the other kind of control is more through the mind and the willpower and suppressing their wills and kind of aligning them to do what he wanted them to do. And then when he's gone, it's...
Right. Something I was kind of noticing about the whole mythos is that the orcs, when Sauron is incapacitated, are just a nuisance.
Right.
And then he comes back, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we got to mobilize.
Right, because his will has been exerted on them. So, in the One Ring and in AIM, in the One Ring role-playing game, they have this whole thing about shadow points. And the key concept is if you do non-heroic stuff, you go against the Song of Arda and you do bad stuff, you are slipping closer and closer to Morgoth nature and making yourself vulnerable to being controlled by Morgoth nature, by losing your free will. By harming others, by taking away their free will, you lose your own free will over time. And in the role-playing game, eventually that's represented as the GM, the lore master, takes away your character sheet and controls your character, and eventually it can become permanent if you go too far down the road. All the Númenórean kings and such, the kings of men, who were under the 9 rings of men, they lost their free will completely.
So they got converted into puppets.
Yeah, Tolkien is all about free will is good, and coercion and lack of free will is evil.
Well, actually, as for the Nazgul, to a certain, and you could say that they passed to death. So the spirit from Ilúvatar had passed on, but their bodies remained moving. Like the Nazgul.
No, they're
well, they live beyond their
whites.
They live beyond their allotted lifespan.
By the rings to Sauron's will.
But I'm speculating here. What if it's more of a case of their spirit has moved on, but their bodies remain active?
No,
I think it's the other way around.
It was the other way. It was their spirit that was bound. Because remember, with the flood outside of Elrond, Rivendell, their spirits were destroyed. Their bodies were destroyed, and their spirits fled back to Sauron to be made into new forms.
To find new clothing, as it were.
So it's the spirits that are bound. The rings bind their spirit.
So in that case, Sauron is going against the order of the Ilúvatar has determined.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's a violation of the rules.
And as wraiths, they're twisted spirits.
Yes.
And once they perish, as it were, that their spirits go not to Aman. Well, no, as men, would they even go to Mandos? I don't know. But the idea is, when you look at...
he didn't really comment on
the
Nazgul spirits.
No, but they're spirits for sure, because when the Witch King dies... Actually, that's a great passage to read, but we can...
My understanding, if I remember correctly, is they dissipate. Yeah. They don't get to go beyond the halls of Menace. They're bound.
Truly, they're almost the only ones who completely
nature became so bound with the planet, he lost his power, and then they stuck him in the void. And then Sauron, too, was bound. And so my take on it, and I could be mistaken, but my understanding of it is when Sauron's will was no longer there to keep their spirits together, their spirits just dissipated and did not get to go on.
Not even immortality.
Right.
I think that's the most reasonable conclusion.
Yeah, just oblivion.
Right. What would you say as far as the judgment on Saruman? Because you see this interesting piece at the Scouring the Shire, where no, it's before the Scouring, isn't it? It's the piece in the book. The movie's clouded my mind, to be honest with you, but the piece when
he's still in Isengard.
afterwards when Grima
Grima Wormtongue
Turns
stabs
throws
him.
he throws the knife is what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And kills him. That's outside the Shire, isn't it?
Yeah, that was in the Shire. That was Sharky and
Was that
yeah.
was that after the Scouring or before?
That was the end of the Scouring.
Right, it's at the end of Scouring.
Yeah.
So at that point, Saruman's body crumbles, but
Mhm.
then it describes this kind of this mist, as it were, which rises, and then kind of longingly looks towards the west,
But he can't come back.
But-
he's body.
and then it just
yeah,
dissipates.
yeah, he didn't get to go back to.
So even the
Yeah. Istari.
Maiar.
and that's a Maya.
Yeah, well, Istari was a subsect of the Maya.
Subset of the Maya. Yeah,
Right. Even he
Interesting.
didn't get to come back.
sure.
The punishment is dispersion. And in the role playing context, that there's still an awareness of being, but you no longer have control over your being. You're scattered, and you suffer in this infinite.
So, Truly a
inability-
ghost,
Yeah,
but
truly
not
a ghost with
even-
no ghost powers.
but not even
Yeah.
the ability.
Just an awareness of infinity and unable to do anything.
But in his subcreation,
Because that fits in with Morgoth and Sauron being able to rebuild and regather their spirit.
at the
Because
end.
they get multiple times.
Well, right, but
They
at the
get
very
dissipated.
end, there's rumors that at the very end,
Right. Well, like when Sauron's body gets destroyed at Numenor,
right?
so his body's destroyed. His spirit flees back to his stronghold and talks about it recoalescing. coalescing,
Yeah.
And slowly building strength back up, but he can never have a fair form again.
Best
I
he
think
can
this
manage is an
fits
eye.
that same concept that the Numenorian kings, if they had more power, would eventually be able to recoalesce. But they're scattered to the winds.
Well-
But there must still be some kind of awareness that's completely ineffective, but a form of torture.
And Gandalf
Form of
says,
hell.
the form it comes back, but it'll be in ages.
Right, yeah,
Future.
for the fourth age.
And because the ring and so much of his will was bound up in the
Right.
ring,
And
that's what
bound
allowed
in the
him
earth.
to eat more
Right.
easily come back.
Exactly.
So once the ring is destroyed,
He didn't
his
have that, exactly.
his
Focal
self-existence
point.
and
Yeah.
his it's almost like a unity of thinking,
Yeah, well, it was his focal point.
his focal point.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because the elves have this word Fea,
Yes.
so that
Yeah,
spirit.
Freya, Fea, and yeah, we got
Right.
body and spirit and
We'll have to come back to
Mind.
this another time
Yeah.
because I think there was an article, a scholarly article, and it might even be
Other
in-
Minds magazine
Yeah.
had a whole thing. I think it was Osric wrote a whole article.
We'll have to
on
come back to that because that would be really
Fea,
interesting.
Croya.
Yeah, wasn't that in the
Freya.
recent one or?
No, that goes back to
That goes back.
that's an early one.
Oh, we got a couple sentences to
Yeah,
finish.
go for it.
before-
Finish it, Richard.
If I can remember where I left off.
Now you will reasonably say, right after the Queen Center part.
Ah, there it is. Okay. Now you will reasonably say that I'm taking myself even more seriously than you did, and making a great song and oration about a good tale, which admittedly owes to its similitude to mere craft. It is so. But the things I have scribbled about arise in some form or another, all writing or art that is not careful to dwell within the walls of observed fact. The draft ends here. At the top, Tolkien has written, "Not sent," and added, "It seems to be taking myself too importantly."
And I'm
I
going
think
to
I
have
was
to-
getting too serious there.
I'm unfortunately I have to bow out to go get my daughter from the airport.
Okay.
But I would encourage you guys to carry on with this
All right.
if you can, and
All
I'll
right.
watch the video and continue the notes.
Okay.
So
I'm
please,
hoping I
let me
didn't
step
crowd
out.
you
You
too
did
much.
not. You did not.
No, I mean the car.
Oh, the card.
Excuse me.
By the way, did you see the new dice that they
Oh.
have out for
No.
the One Ring?
Yeah.
It's nice.
Nice.
Kind of marbled blue and marbled red.
Yeah, good.
So-
Instead of just the green and the white.
Yeah, exactly.
How much are they charging though? Because they tend to be really overpriced.
About the same, maybe another $1.
$20 for
Could
a
you
set.
unplug me, please? Yes. Richard, thank you. Yeah, the meeting's continuing on, everyone. I'm just leaving early. Sorry.
Let me know if you have enough room in your car to get out.
I will. Sorry, I have to leave early.
I understand. Glad you were able to make it.
I'll enjoy the video.
So I'm going to jump straight into the preface from
Good idea.
Fall of Goblin. Thank you very much, Brian, for the gift. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And you know, I
And
noticed.
again, Tolkien Moot, this is our theme for Tolkien Moot 15 in the summer, is the Fall of God.
You're going to leave that
I
one.
am. I was just going to point out that the after the poem section, page 37 is the first version in prose.
Okay.
So that might be a nice one to read. But
Okay.
anyway, I will let you go. Thanks so
Okay.
much.
I hope
you.
I left you enough room to
Yep,
get out.
hopefully.
You will.
We'll see. Yep.
So yeah, let's schedule something to get together for our
Okay.
end crawl.
I'll be in touch.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
So, I'm left all alone.
No, you're not. What am I, wall dust? You calling the people online wall dust? Come on.
No, well, no. I prefer the term wallflowers.
So this is the preface from J.R.R. Tolkien, The Fall of Gondolin, edited by Christopher Tolkien, with illustrations by Alan Lee, and this is just this year, I believe. Yeah, 2018. Preface. In my preface to Baron and Luthien, I remarked that in my 93rd year, this is presumptively, this is Christopher Tolkien speaking, presumptively the last book in the long series of editions of my father's writings, end quote. I use the word presumptively because at the time I thought hazily of treating in the same way as Baron and Luthien the third of my father's great tales, The Fall of Gondolin. But I thought this very improbable, and I presumed, therefore, that Baron and Luthien would be my last. The presumption proved wrong, however, and I must now say that, quote, in my 94th year, The Fall of Gondolin is indubitably the last, end quote. So Christopher Tolkien is 94 years old.
You basically said I didn't expect to live this long.
Yeah, to do it this long. In this book, one sees, from the complex narrative of many strands in various texts, how Middle-earth moved towards the end of the First Age, and how my father's perception of this history that he had conceived unfolded through long years until at last, in what was to be its finest form, it foundered. The story of Middle-earth in the elder days was always a shifting structure. My history of that age, so long and complex as it is, owes its length and complexity to this endless welling up. A new portrayal, a new motive, a new name, above all new associations. My father, as the maker, ponders the large history, and as he writes, he becomes aware of a new element that has entered the story. I will illustrate this by a very brief but notable example, which may stand for many. An essential feature of the story of the Fall of Gondolin was the journey that the man Tuor undertook with his companion Voronwë to find the hidden elvish city of Gondolin. My father told of this very briefly in the original tale, without any noteworthy event, indeed no event at all. But in the final version, in which the journey was much elaborated, one morning out in the wilderness they heard a cry in the woods. We might almost say he heard a cry in the woods, sudden and unexpected. Footnote. To show that this is not fanciful, in his letter to me of 6th of May 1944, my father wrote, quote, "A new character has come on the scene. I am sure I did not invent him. I did not even want him, though I like him. But there he came, walking into the woods of Ithilien, Faramir, the brother of Boromir. A tall man, clothed in black and holding a long black sword, then appeared and came towards them, calling out a name as if he were searching for one who was lost, but without any speech he passed them by. Tuor and Voronwë knew nothing to explain this extraordinary sight, but the maker of the history knows very well who he was. He was none other than the far-famed Turin Turambar, who was the first cousin of Tuor, and he was fleeing from the ruin, unknown to Tuor and Voronwë, of the city of Nargothrond. Here is a breath of one of the great stories of Middle-earth. Turin's flight from Nargothrond is told in the Children of Húrin, his edition, pages 180-181, but with no mention of this meeting, unknown to either of those kinsmen, and never repeated. To illustrate the transformations that took place as time passed, nothing is more striking than the portrayal of the god Ulmo as originally seen, sitting among the reeds and making music at twilight by the river Sirion. But many years later, the Lord of all the waters of the world rises out of the great storm of the sea at Vinyamar. Ulmo does indeed stand at the center of the great myth. With Valinor largely opposed to him, the great god nonetheless mysteriously achieves his end. Looking back over my work, now concluded after some 40 years, I believe that my underlying purpose was, at least in part, to try to give more prominence to the nature of the Silmarillion and its vital existence in relation to the Lord of the Rings, thinking of it rather as the first age of my father's world of Middle-earth and Valinor. There was indeed the Silmarillion that I published in 1977, but this was composed, one might even say contrived, to produce narrative coherence many years after the Lord of the Rings. It could seem isolated, as it were, this large work in a lofty style, supposedly descending from a very remote past, with little of the power and immediacy of the Lord of the Rings. This was no doubt inescapable in the form in which I undertook it, for the narrative of the First Age was of a radically different literary and imaginative nature. Nevertheless, I knew that long before, when The Lord of the Rings was finished, but well before its publication, my father had expressed a deep wish and conviction that the First Age and the Third Age, the world of The Lord of the Rings, should be treated and published as elements or parts of the same work. And we've talked about that many times in the letters, how he held off for years trying to get Unwin and such to publish the Silmarillion with The Lord of the Rings. He said they had to come together, and he even went so far as to try a different publishing company.
What sticks in my mind, though, is that after his death, Christopher Tolkien drops off the material, and he says it's a big stack of papers tied together with twine.
It was a mess.
Yeah,
it was a mess. But Tolkien tried to get Unwin to do it. Unwin said, this is totally too difficult. And so Tolkien even tried to take the work to another publisher who was excited to get him.
Didn't they say it didn't fit the audience?
Right. Well, they had a lot of reasons. They came with a lot. They just like, this, no, we don't think we should do this. This is so arcane. It's so out there. And it's so massive, and it was going to be expensive, and just all of it. So he eventually capitulated, came back to Alan Unwin, but then asked if he could at least write some appendices to explain the bits and pieces that are in The Lord of the Rings to give people context. And that's why the appendices were there, to explain about Beren and Luthien and the history of Weathertop and all these bits and pieces as a tiny snapshot of the bigger picture. And then yes, posthumously, Christopher Tolkien put together the Silmarillion as a mess. It was a mess.
Right. That was after he'd organized it a little bit. Before that, when Tolkien was trying to get them, it was probably even worse.
Right, and all the more reason why Alan Unwin was like, no!
We respectfully decline.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. In the chapter of this book, The Evolution of the Story, I have printed parts of a long and very revealing letter that he wrote to his publishers, Sir Stanley Unwin, in February 1950. Very soon after the actual writing of The Lord of the Rings had reached its end, in which he unburdened his mind on this matter. At that time, he portrayed himself self-mockingly as horrified when he contemplated, quote, this impracticable monster of some 600,000 words, end quote. The more especially when the publishers were expecting that they had what they had demanded, a sequel to The Hobbit, while this new book, he said, was, quote, really a sequel to the Silmarillion, end quote, as we were just talking about.
It did shift from a childhood story
It
to
did.
something
It got darker. It got more
weightier.
immense. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. He never modified his opinion. He even wrote of the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings as, quote, one long saga of the jewels and the rings, end quote. He held out against the separate publication of either work on those grounds. But in the end, he was defeated, as will be seen in the evolutions of the story, recognizing that there was no hope that his wish would be granted. And he consented to the publication of The Lord of the Rings alone. After the publication of the Silmarillion, I turned to an investigation lasting many years of the entire collection of manuscripts that he had left to me. In the history of Middle-earth, I restricted myself as a general principle to, quote, drive the horses abreast, end quote, so to speak, not story by story through the years in their own paths, but rather the whole narrative movement as it evolved through the years. As I observed in the foreword to the first volume of the history, quote, the author's vision of his own vision underwent a continual slow shifting, shedding and enlarging. Only in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings did parts of it emerge to become fixed in print in his own lifetime. The study of Middle-earth and Valinor is thus complex, for the object of the study was not stable, but existed, as it were, longitudinally in time, the author's lifetime, and not only transversely in time, as a printed book that undergoes no essential further change. Thus it comes about that from the nature of the work, the history is often difficult to follow. When the time had come, as I supposed, to end at this long series of editions, it occurred to me to try out, as best I could, a different mode. To follow, using previously published texts, one single particular narrative from its earliest existing form and throughout its later development. Hence, Beren and Luthien. In my edition of The Children of Húrin, 2007, I did indeed describe in an appendix the chief alterations to the narrative in successive versions, but in Beren and Luthien, I actually cited earlier texts in full, beginning with the earliest form in the Lost Tales. Now that it is certain that the present book is the last, I have adopted the same curious form in The Fall of Gondolin. Do you want to continue there?
Sure. In this mode, there comes to light passages or even full-fledged conceptions that were later abandoned. Thus, in Beren and Luthien. I have an American accent. I'm sorry. The commanding, if brief, entrance to Vilo?
Of Tavildo.
Tavildo?
Prince of Cats.
Prince of Cats. The Fall of Gondolin is unique in this respect. In the original version of the tale, the overwhelming attack on Gondolin with its unimagined new weapons is seen with such clarity and in such detail that the very names are given of the places in the city where the buildings were burnt down or where celebrated warriors died. In the later versions, the destruction and fighting is reduced to a paragraph. That the ages of Middle-earth are conjoint can be brought home most immediately by the reappearance in their persons, and not merely as memories, of the figures of the elder days in the Lord of the Rings. Very old, indeed, was the Ent, Treebeard. The Ents were the most ancient people surviving in the Third Age. As he carried Meriadoc and Peregrine through the forest of Fangorn, he chanted to them. In the willow meads of
Tessaranon.
Tessaranon,
The willow meads of Tessaranon.
I walked in the spring. Ah, the sight and smell of the spring in Nan Tessarion. So he's talking about things that were basically set decoration, have a history.
Well, these things, yeah, I mean, what things were like long ago.
Yeah.
Remember, Greenwood the Great is gone.
Well, I mean,
the Osirian is under the sea. He talks about Osirian under the sea.
in my
It's
writing,
under.
in the writing that I've published, I've been trying to establish a place. So I will make references to things
Sure.
that might have deep history that I haven't
Sure.
gone through and established
Sure,
yet,
sure, yeah.
to give you that feeling that this
Yeah, it
is
gives
an
you a
existing
scaffold to work
world.
from. Yeah, scaffold to work from, yeah.
Anyways, it was very long indeed before Treebeard sang to the hobbits in Fangorn that Ulmo, Lord of the Waters, came to Middle-earth to speak to Tuor and Tessarion.
Tessaranon.
Ugh.
Tessaranon.
I can't speak Elvish, I'm sorry.
The Land of Willows.
The Land of Willows. Or again, at the end of the story, we read of Elrond and Elros, sons of Arundel, in a later age, the master of Rivendell and the first king of Numenor. Here they are very young, taken into protection by the son of Fëanor. But here I want to introduce, as the emblem of the ages, the figure of Círdan, shipwright.
Just Círdan.
Círdan.
Círdan. It's just two syllables. It's a rolled R, but it's just two syllables.
Did I roll the R too much?
You made it a syllable instead of an R roll.
Wasn't
Círdan.
intentional.
That's fine.
Círdan, the shipwright. He was the bearer of Narya.
Narya, yep.
Okay, I got that right. The Ring of Fire, one of the three rings of the elves, until he surrendered it to Gandalf. Of him it was said that he saw further and deeper than any other in Middle-earth. In the First Age, he was the lord of the havens of Brithombar.
Brithombar.
Brithombar?
Brithombar.
Brithombar?
And Eglarest.
And Elgilrest.
Eglarest.
On the coast of Beleriand.
Beleriand.
Beleriand. Is the D really
Beleriand.
pronounced? Or?
Yeah.
And when they were destroyed by Morgoth after the battle, unnumbered tears.
The Arnodiath. I forget. Anyway, yeah.
Huh?
Anyway, go ahead.
Lost me.
I was trying to remember the name of it in Elvish.
He escaped with a remnant of his people to the Isle of Balar.
Isle of Balar.
Balar.
Mm-hmm.
There and at the mouth of the Ciron, he turned again to the building of ships, and at the request of the king of Torgon of Gondolin, he built 7. These ships sailed into the west, but no messages from any one of them ever came back until the last. In that ship was Voronwe,
Mm-hmm.
sent out from Gondolin, who survived shipwreck and became guide and companion of Tuor on their great journey to the hidden city. To Gandalf, Círdan declared long after when he gave him the Ring of Fire, "But as for me, my heart is with the sea, and I will dwell by the grey shores, guarding the havens until the last ship sails." So Círdan appears for the last time on the last day of the Third Age, when Elrond and Galadriel, with Bilbo and Frodo, rode up to the gates of the grey heavens where Gandalf was awaiting them. Círdan the shipwright came forth to greet them. Very tall he was, his beard was long, and he was grey and old. Said that his eyes were keen as stars, and he looked at them and bowed and said, "All is now ready." Then Círdan led them to the heavens, and there was a white ship lying. After farewells were spoken, those who were departing went aboard, and the sails were drawn up, and the wind blew, and slowly the ship slipped away down the long grey firth, and the light of the glass of Galadriel. Sorry, that one's hard for me to say for some reason. The Frodo bore glimmered and was lost, and the ship went out into the high sea and passed on into the west. Thus following the path of Tuor and Idril, as the end of the first age approached, who set sail into the sunset and the west, and came no more into any tale or song. You want to take back over?
Yeah. The tale of the fall of Gondolin gathers as it proceeds many glancing references to other stories, other places, and other times, to events in the past that govern actions and presumptions in the present time of the tale. The impulse in such cases, to offer explanation, or at least some enlightenment, is strong. But keeping in mind the purpose of the book, I have not peppered the texts with small superimposed numbers leading to notes. What I have aimed at is to provide some assistance of this nature in forms that can be readily neglected if desired. In the first place, I have in the prologue introduced a citation from my father's Sketch of the Mythology in 1926 in order to provide a picture, in his words, of the world from its beginning to the events leading finally to the foundation of Gondolin. Further, I have used the list of names in many cases for statements a good deal fuller than the name implies. And I have also introduced, after the list of names, a number of separate notes on very varied topics, ranging from the creation of the world to the significance of the name Earendel and the prophecy of Mondos. Very intractable, of course, is the treatment of the changing of names, or of the forms of names. This is the more complex, since a particular form is by no means necessarily an indication of the relative date of the composition in which it occurs. My father would make the same change in a text at quite different times when he noticed the need for it. I have not aimed at consistency throughout the book, that is to say, neither settling for one form throughout, nor in every case following that in the manuscript, but allowing such variation as seems best. Thus I retain Ilmur when it occurs for Ulmo, since it is a regular occurrence of a linguistic nature, but give always Thorondor for Thorondor, King of Eagles, since my father was clearly intending to change it throughout. Lastly, I have arranged the content of the book in a manner distinct from that in Beren Luthien. The texts of the tale appear first, in succession and with little or no commentary. An account of the evolution of the story then follows, with a discussion of my father's profoundly saddening abandonment of the last version of the tale at the moment when Tuor passed through the last gate of Gondolin. I will end by repeating that I wrote what I wrote nearly 40 years ago. Quote, "It is the remarkable fact that the only full account that my father ever wrote of the story of Tuor's sojourn in Gondolin, his union with Idril Celebrimbor, the birth of Earendel, the treachery of Maeglin, the sack of the city, and the escape of the fugitives, a story that was a central element in his imagination of the First Age, was the narrative composed in his youth." End quote. Gondolin and Nargothrond were each made once and not remade. They remained powerful sources and images, the more powerful perhaps because never remade, and never remade perhaps because so powerful. Though he set out to remake Gondolin, he never reached the city again. After climbing the endless slope of the Orv Falch Erkor and passing through the long line of heraldic gates, he paused with Tur at the vision of Gondolin amid the plain and never recrossed Tumladen. The publication in its own history of the third and last of the Great Tales is the occasion for me to write a few words in honor of the work of Alan Lee, who has illustrated each tale in turn. He has brought to this task a deep perception of the inner nature of scene, and even that he has chosen from the great range of the elder days, and events that he has chosen from the great range of the elder days. Excuse me. Thus he has seen and shown in the children of Hurin the captive Hurin, chained to a stone chair on Thangorodrim, listening to Morgoth's terrible curse. He has seen and shown in Beren and Luthien the last of Feanor's sons, seated motionless on their horses, and gazing at the new star in the western sky, which is the Silmaril, for which so many lives had been taken. And in the fall of Gondolin, he has stood beside Tur, and with him marveled at the sight of the hidden city for which he has journeyed so far. Finally, I am very grateful to Chris Smith of HarperCollins for the exceptional help that he has given to me in the preparation of the detail of the book, especially in his assiduous accuracy, drawing on his knowledge both of the demands of publication and the nature of the book. To my wife, Bailey, also, without her unwavering support during the long time the book has been in the making, it would never have been made. I would also like to thank all those who generously wrote to me when it appeared that Beren and Luthien was to be my last book. So I think we're going to skip for now until we have more people here to discuss it. We can jump back to it. The prologue. I think we should get to the story.
I should have it read by the next time we meet. The whole
Excuse
book,
me.
I mean, not just the prologue.
Okay.
I'm a fast reader if I like the story. So.
Good, good.
If it comes across as a textbook, I'm really slow.
Well, then again, I'm reading through prologue, and it gives a lot of historical context for those who may not know the setting. And it's got, there's 33. All right, Tale of Fall of Gondolin. So, do we want to read through the prologue? I mean, obviously, we won't get through all that today. But it does set the context of what's going on.
Yeah. How far do you want to go, I guess, is the question.
Okay, I'm going to skip the part that talks about all the writing of it for now. Again, we can go back to that when there's more people here next month. But here is context of what is going on, the history on page 24, it looks like. It gives all the context, so I'm going to start from there.
Do you want me to take over for a little bit?
Sure.
So I can stumble over the
page
names
24, after the dispatch of the Nine Valar.
Stumble over the names and embarrass myself?
Yeah, it's up to you. Whatever you would like. Challenge my choice.
After the dispatch of the Nine Valar for the governance of the world, Morgoth, demon of dark, rebels against the overlordship of Manwë. Is it Manwë?
Manwë.
Manwë. Overthrows the lamps set up to illuminate the world,
Illumine
the world,
Mm-hmm.
and floods the Isle of Alamarin, where the Valar dwell, or gods. He fortifies a place of dungeons in the north. The Valar remove to the uttermost west, bordered by the outer seas and the final wall, and eastward by the towering mountains of Valinor, which the gods built. When you're reading to yourself, you can just sort of gloss over and make up the names and don't have to worry about the pronunciation. In Valinor, they gather all light and beautiful things and build their mansions, gardens, and city. But Manwë and his wife Varda have halls upon the highest mountain, Taniquetal, whence they can see across the world to the dark east. Yavanna Paulorian plants the two trees in the middle of the plain of Valinor outside the gates of the city of Valmar. They grow under her songs, and one has dark green leaves with shining silver beneath, and white blossoms like cherry, from which a dew of silver light falls. The other has golden-edged leaves of young green, like the beech, and yellow blossoms like the hanging blossoms of
laburnum,
which give out heat and blazing light. Each tree waxes for 7 hours to full glory, and then wanes for 7. Twice a day, therefore, comes a time of softer light when each tree is faint and their light is mingled. The outer lands, Middle Earth, are in darkness. The growth of things is checked when Morgoth quenched the lamps. There are forests of darkness, of yew and fir and ivy. The Orme, Orme sometimes hunts, but in the north, Morgoth and his demonic broods, Balrogs, and the orcs, goblins, also called Glamhoth, or people of hate, hold sway. Varda looks on the darkness in his mood, taking all the hoarded light of the sylph, is it, I want to put an S in there. Sylpian. The white tree she makes and strews the stars. Oh, so she makes droplets of light and then spreads them across the vault, as it were.
The void, yep.
Well, I was thinking of the vault as the Ark of Heaven kind of thing. Yeah. At the making of the stars, the children of Earth awake. The Eldar, or elves. They are found by Orme, dwelling by the starlit pool. Cuvianen, water of awakening in the east. He rides home to Valinor, filled with their beauty, and tells the Valar, who are reminded of their duty to the earth, since they come hither knowing that their office was to govern it for the 2 races of earth, who should come after each in appointed time. There follows an expedition to the fortress of the north, Angband, Iron Hell, but this is now too strong for them to destroy. Morgoth is nonetheless taken captive and consigned to the halls of Mandos, who dwell in the north of Valinor. So they couldn't destroy the fortress, but they managed to capture Morgoth.
Yeah, well, they made him come out to fight one-on-one. It was challenged, and he lost the fight.
That was because that was
physical
Tolkien?
Combat. Yeah.
Who came from beyond the veil, as I recall.
Well, no, he was a fellow Vala.
Well, I mean, he wasn't part of the original group, as I recall.
No, he was. He was the strong one.
What I remember from that legend is that
he may have joined a little later, but he'd been there for a long time before this.
Well,
incident.
everything's relative when you don't die.
Sure.
I mean,
yeah. So the Eldalie.
Thank you. The Eldalie, people of the elves, are invited to Valinor for fear of the evil things of Morgoth that still wandered in the dark. So he was still playing with sculpting, we could say. A great march is made by the Eldar from the east, led by Orme and his white horse. The Eldar are divided into 3 hosts, one under Ingwe, after called the Quende, light elves, one after called the Noldoi, gnomes or deep elves. Sorry?
Nodoli.
One after called the Teleri. Sea elves. Many of them are lost upon the march and wander in the woods of the world, becoming the various hosts of the Ilkorindi.
Elves who never dwelt in Kor.
I thought those were the Grey Elves?
Well, this is another... He's got additional info for us, so that's what's cool about it.
Maybe these are like the parent.
Well, yeah, these
the
are
root stock.
Elves, yeah, because anyway, keep going. Yeah.
So, the chief of these was Thingol.
Yeah, who was a Grey Elf.
Okay. Who heard Melian
Sindar. Yeah.
and heard nightingale singing and was enchanted and fell asleep for an age. Melian was one of the divine maidens of the Vala Lorien, who sometimes wandered into the outer world. Melian and Thingol become queen and king of woodland elves in Doriath, living in a hall called the Thousand Caves.
Okay. I'll take it over from there.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. The other elves came to the ultimate shores of the west. In the north, these in those days sloped westward in the north until only a narrow sea divided them from the land of the gods. And this narrow sea was filled with grinding ice, the Helcaraxe. But at the point to which the elf hosts came, a wide, dark sea stretched west. There were two Valar of the Sea, Ulmo, or Ilmir, the mightiest of all Valar next to Manwë, was lord of all waters, but dwelt often in Valinor or in the outer seas. Osse and Lady Uanin, whose tresses lay through all the sea, loved rather the seas of the world that washed the shores beneath the mountains of Valinor. Ulmor uprooted the half-sunk island of Alamoren where the Valar had first dwelt, and embarking on it with the Nodoldi and Quendi, who arrived first, bore them to Valinor, so used the whole island to transport them.
Well,
Yeah, because they're gods.
Yeah, a lot of space there.
Yeah. The Teleri dwelt sometime by the shores of the sea, awaiting him, and hence their love of it. While they were being also transported by Ulmo, Osse, in jealousy and out of love for their singing, chained the island to the sea bottom far out in the bay of Ferry, whence the mountains of Valinor could dimly be seen. No other land was near it, and it was called the Lonely Isle. There the Teleri dwelt a long age, becoming different in tongue and learning strange music from Osse, who made the seabirds for their delight. The gods gave a home in Valinor to the other Eldar. Because they longed even among the tree-lit gardens of Valinor for a glimpse of the stars, a gap was made in the encircling mountains, and there, in a deep valley, a green hill, Kor, was built. This was lit from the west by the trees. To the east, it looked out onto the Bay of Ferry and the Lonely Isle, and beyond to the shadowy seas. Thus some of the blessed light of Valinor filtered into the outer lands, Middle-earth, and falling on the Lonely Isle caused its western shores to grow green and fair.
Didn't the Lonely Isle later become Numenor?
Nope.
No?
Nope. Different island.
Okay.
On the top of Kor, the city of the elves was built and was called Tun. The Quendi became most beloved by Manwë and Varda, the Nodoldi by Aule the smith, and Mandos the wise. The Nodoli invented gems and made them in countless numbers, filling all Tun with them and all the halls of the gods. The greatest in skill and magic of the Nodoli was Finwë's elder son Feanor. Footnote. Finwë was the leader of the Nodoli on the great journey from Cuavienen. His eldest son was Feanor. His second son was Fingolfin, father of Fingin and Turgon. His third son, Finarfin, father of Finrod Felagund. Now these are critical because this is the whole tale of the Silmarils.
Yeah.
These people,
I
the sons of
did
Feanor.
read something about this in an earlier version of the Silmarillion.
Yeah, the Silmarillion, the sons of Feanor.
The
It's
newest
critical.
version that I've got, and I've misplaced where I put that copy. I might have thrown it away because it was. They chopped out large sections of that story for
Yeah,
that
that's too bad.
volume. A lot of the poetry's gone.
Oh, that's terrible. He contrived 3 jewels. So Feanor, Finwë's elder son Feanor. So Feanor contrived the 3 jewels, the Silmarils, wherein a living fire combined of the light of the 2 trees was set. They shone of their own light. Impure hands were burned by them. The Teleri, seeing afar the light of Valinor, were torn between desire to rejoin their kindred and to dwell by the sea. Ulmo taught them craft of boat building. Osse gave them swans, and harnessing many swans to their boats, they sailed to Valinor, and dwelt there on the shores where they could see the light of the trees, and go to Valimar if they wished, but could sail and dance in the waters touched to light by the radiance that came past Kor. The other Eldar gave them many gems, especially opals and diamonds and other pale crystals, which were strewn upon the beaches of the Bay of Ferry. They themselves invented pearls. Their chief town was Swanhaven upon the shores northward of the Pass of Kor. The gods were now beguiled by Morgoth, who, having passed 7 ages in the prisons of Mandos, in gradually lightened pain, came before the conclave of the gods in due course. He looked with greed and malice upon the Eldar, who also sit there about the knees of the gods, and lusts specifically after the jewels. He dissembles his hatred and desire for revenge. He is allowed a humble dwelling in Valinor, and after a while goes freely about, Only Ulmo, foreboding ill, while Tulkas the Strong, who first captured him, watches him. Morgoth helps the Eldar in many deeds, but slowly poisons their peace with lies. He suggests that the gods brought them to Valinor out of jealousy, for fear their marvelous skill in magic and beauty should grow too strong for them outside in the world. The Quendi and Teleri are little moved, but the Nodoli, the wisest of the elves, become affected. They begin at whiles to murmur against the gods and their kindred. They are filled with vanity of their skill. Most of all does Morgoth fan the flames of the heart of Feanor, but all the while he lusts for the immortal Silmarils, although Feanor has cursed forever anyone, god or elf or mortal, that shall come hereafter who touches them. Morgoth, lying, tells Feanor that Fingolfin and his son Fingon are plotting to usurp the leadership of the gnomes from Feanor and his sons, and to gain the Silmarils. A quarrel breaks out between the son of Finwë. Feanor is summoned before the gods, and the lies of Morgoth laid bare. Feanor is banished from Tún, and with him goes Finwë, who loves Feanor best of his sons, and many of the gnomes.
I thought Tolkien had decided to avoid the term gnomes because of the
He
associations.
used it interchangeably between... Tolkien used it, the Nodoli and the gnomes and such, he used interchangeably.
Didn't he at one point decide that
He decided in The Lord of the Rings not to do that, but he kept going back and forth in the context of Silmarillion works. So that's why Christopher here is going and mixing, letting us know the whole combination. Remember, he merged these together. A quarrel breaks out between sons of Feanor. Feanor is summoned before the gods, and the lies of Morgoth lay bare. Feanor is banished from Tún, and with him goes Finwë, who loves Feanor best of his sons and many of the gnomes. They build a treasury northward in Valinor in the hills near Mandos' halls. Fingolfin rules the gnomes that are left in Tún. Thus Morgoth's words seem justified, and the bitterness he sowed goes on after his words are disproved. Tulkas is sent to put Morgoth in chains once more, but he escapes through the pass of Kor into the dark region beneath the feet of Tanaquetil called Arvalin, where the shadow is thickest in all the world. There he finds Ungoliant, Gloomweaver, who dwells in a cleft in the mountains, and sucks up light or shining things to spin them out again in webs of black and choking darkness, fog, and gloom. With Ungoliant he plots revenge. Only a terrible reward will bring her to dare the dangers of Valinor or the sight of the gods. She weaves a dense gloom about her to protect her, and swings on cords from pinnacle to pinnacle, till she has scaled the highest peak of the mountains in the south of Valinor, little guarded because of their height and their distance from the old fortress of Morgoth. She makes a ladder that Morgoth can scale. They creep into Valinor. Morgoth stabs the trees, and Ungoliant sucks up their juices, belching forth clouds of blackness. The trees succumb slowly to the poisoned sword and to the venomous lips of Ungoliant. The gods are dismayed by a twilight at midday, and vapors of black float in about the ways of the city. They are too late. The trees die while they wail about them. But Tulkas and Orome and many others hunt on horseback in the gathering gloom for Morgoth. Wherever Morgoth goes, there the confusing darkness is greatest, owing to the webs of Ungoliant. Gnomes from the treasury of Finwë come in and report that Morgoth is assisted by a spider of darkness. They had seen them making for the north. Morgoth had stayed his flight in the treasury, slain Finwë and many of his men, and carried off the Silmarils and a vast hoard of the most splendid jewels of the elves. In the meanwhile, Morgoth escapes by Ungoliant's aid, northward and crossing the grinding ice, when he has regained the northern regions of the world, Ungoliant summons him to pay the other half of a reward. The first half was the sap of the light of trees. Now she claims one half of the jewels. Morgoth yields them up, and she devours them. She has now become monstrous, but he will not give her any share in the Silmarils. She enmeshes him in a black web, but he is rescued by the Balrogs with whips of flame and the hosts of the orcs, and Ungoliant goes away into the uttermost south. Morgoth returns to Angband, and his power and the numbers of his demons and orcs become countless. He forges an iron crown and sets therein the Silmarils, though his hands are burned black by them, and he is never again free from the pain of the burning. The crown, the Iron Crown, he never leaves off for a moment, and he never leaves the deep dungeons of his fortress, governing his vast armies from his deep throne. Do you want to continue from there? Or do you want to discuss any of that so far? We have about 5 minutes left.
Well, I was thinking about it. Kind of sets up the. I vaguely remember.
Yeah, it's refreshing all the story.
Lutherian.
All of it. All of it's being refreshed to lead towards Gondolin. Because then we get to page 37 and the tale of the fall of Gondolin. This is all the prologue of what was going on before then. To refresh your memory before you jump into the story. All else is prologue. Or do you want me to continue?
Why don't I read to the poetry?
Go ahead.
I suppose.
Yep.
That should take 5 minutes, right? The way I stumble over the
It'll
words.
take what it'll take. Go ahead.
When it became clear that Morgoth had escaped the gods, assemble about the dead trees and sit in the darkness, stricken and dumb for a long while, caring about nothing. The day which Morgoth chose for his attack was a day of festival throughout Valinor. Upon this day it was the custom of the chief Valor and many of the elves, especially the Quende, to climb the long winding paths in endless procession to Manway's halls upon Tenqueitl. Or am I mispronouncing?
Tenqueitl.
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 Tenqueitl. All the Quende became of the Noldai, who dwelt under Fingolfin, dwelt still in Tune, had gone to
Gone to Tenqueitl and were singing upon.
and were singing upon its topmost height, when the watchers from afar decried the fading of the trees. Most of the Noldai were in the plain. Nodoli were in the plain, and the Teleri upon the shore. The fogs and darkness drift in now off the seas through the pass of Kor as the trees die. Fëanor summons the gnomes to Tune, rebelling against his banishment.
And that's Feanor, not Fëanor.
Sorry,
It's a separate
Feanor.
consonant. Or, syllable.
There is a vast concourse on the square on the summit of Kor about the town of Ing. Is it Ing? I-N-G.
Ing, that's fine, yeah.
Lit by torches. Feanor makes a violent speech and is through his wrath. Though his wrath is for Morgoth, his words are in part the fruit of Morgoth's lies. He bids the gnomes fly in the darkness while the gods are wrapped in mourning to seek freedom in the world and to seek out Morgoth. Now Valinor is no more blissful than the world outside. Fingolfin and Fingon speak against him. The assembled gnomes vote for flight, and Fingolfin and Fingon yield. They will not desert their people, but they retain command over half of the Nodoli, of Tune. The flight begins. The Teleri will not join. The gnomes cannot escape without boats and do not dare cross the grinding ice. They attempt to seize the swan ships in Swanhaven, and a fight ensues.
And thus the kindred slaying.
The first between the races of the earth, in which many Teleri are slain and their ships carried off. A curse is pronounced upon the gnomes that they shall after suffer often from treachery and the fear of treachery among their own kindred in punishment for the blood spilled at Swanhaven. They sail north along the coast of Valinor. Mandos sends an emissary who, speaking from a high cliff, hails them as they sail by and warns them to return, and when they will not, speaks of the prophecy of Mandos concerning the fate of after days. The gnomes come to the narrowing of the seas and prepare to sail. While they are encamped upon the shore, Feanor and his sons and people sail off, taking with them all the boats, leaving Fingolfin on the shore treacherously, on the far shore treacherously, thus beginning the curse of Swanhaven. They burn the boats as soon as they land in the east of the world.
And they were supposed to send them back to ferry the others across. Yeah.
And Fingolfin's people see the light in the sky. The same light also tells the orcs of the landing. So Glahedriel's husband Wasn't he killed in the crossing of the grinding ice?
I think so. I forget that part.
And
I think so.
and his appearance at the White Council is a reincarnation kind of thing,
No,
isn't it?
I think she just remarried. I'll have to double check on that. I don't remember. Fuzzy on Gladridge's
Right.
history. Let's finish because we're out of time here.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Fingolfin's people wander miserably. Some under Fingolfin return to Valinor to seek the guard's pardon. Fingon leads the main host north and over the grinding ice. Many are lost. Among the poems that my father embarked on during his years at the University of Leeds, most notably the Lay of the Children of Hurin, are in alliterative verse, was The Flight of the Noldai from Valinor. This poem, also in alliterative verse, was abandoned after 150 lines. It is certain that it was written at Leeds in, I think extremely probable, 1925, the year in which he took up his appointment to the professorship of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford. From this poetic fragment I will cite a part, beginning with the vast concourse on the square on the summit of Cor, where Feanor made a violent speech, described in a passage of the sketch of the mythology, page 32. The name Finn at lines 4 and 16 is the gnomish form of Finwë, the father of Feanor. Bredel. At line 49, the gnomish name of Varda.
So we'll leave it there, as that's page 33, start with the poem.
Yeah.
And so we'll pick that up next month. So we're here the third Saturday of each month from 1 to 3 p.m. And you can get more info at tolkienscholars.org. Thank you to RPG Research for letting us use your stream at twitch.tv/RPG Research. And thank you, Richard, for joining. Thank you, Brian, for being here when you could. Thank you, Chris, for joining the stream. Thank you, Lextrux, for joining the stream. And anybody else, thank you very much. Feel free to leave comments on the tolkienscholars.org website, or you can email tolkienscholars@gmail.com. And we're also in Discord. If you go to the tolkienscholars.org website and click on news, you'll see information for joining our Discord chat channel. And wherever you may be well. Namarie.
Namare.